Question number 4 this week comes from Eric Barber, and Eric writes, I'm sure you've covered this before on your channel, but since I'm new here, I'll throw the topic out there just in case. Welcome to the Star Wars Canon Podcast, brother. I do appreciate you coming along. When are we going to get more material between episodes 6 and 7? That's the time period most of us really care about right now, and I'm dying to see it. Plus, what do you think Star Wars has in store for us in the future? Thanks for the question, Eric. Yes, I've gone over this a couple times actually on the channel. But I'll go over it again for you. It's no big deal, and it's going to be the same answer I give every time. Next year, we're going to get more content between 6 and 7 next year. Now, don't get me wrong. There's already a lot of content. I don't want to say a lot. There's quite a bit of content between episodes 6 and 7 already. You know, we've got the entire Aftermath trilogy of novels. We got Alphabet Squadron, Last Shot, The Legends of Luke Skywalker, Bloodline, Phasma, some short stories with some aliens before the Awakening. There's a lot there. However, it only goes to a certain point where there's still like this 15, 20-year gap that's not being covered. And I'm assuming that's the gap you're talking about. One of the biggest things people have always talked about is, or that has asked on this podcast is, why is this new canon different? What makes it different from the EU? And the EU novels, a lot of them were Han, Luke, Leia novels. A lot of them were, I mean, look at the Heir to the Empire trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy. That was essentially the continuation of Star Wars with the big three, with a new villain. You know what I mean? And that was a lot. It was either surrounding those three or their kids. And that was essentially it. Mara Jade, you know, I mean, just all these other stories that, or all these other characters that were heavily, you know, rooted with the classic trilogy. And we don't have that in the new canon. We don't have any Han, Luke, Leia stories. We have some we have a Han and Landa story. We have a Leia story. You know, we don't have any. We have a couple of Luke stories. We don't even know if are true. There's not a lot of Luke stuff, and I would love to see some Han, Luke, Leia stuff. But I'm going back and I'm going to say I'm going to say about February, March next year. Here in the next 3 or 4 months, you might start hearing some announcements about some books coming out. The main reason I say that is I still fully believe that Thrawn is instrumental in the rise of the First Order. I'm convinced of that at this point. The last time, and spoiler alert, the last time we saw Thrawn outside of the novels was in Rebels when him and Ezra shot off into hyperspace with the weird hyperspace whales, right? And that was it. Timothy Zahn has come out and said, hey, I've got an idea for a 4th book, and I want it to be the Ezra Thrawn story. We just got the 3rd Thrawn book. We get a Thrawn book every year about the same time. And it looks like next year, if everything stays in line, we're going to get that story right about the time I'm saying we're going to be getting stuff between 6 and 7. I think once episode 9 comes out, you're going to see a slew of stuff. I think once episode 9 comes out and you know the whole story of 7, 8, 9, I think that's when they're going to go back and talk about, okay, well, now this is how we got there. This is, you know, where Snoke came from. We're getting a Snoke comic. We're starting to slowly get the history of Snoke. So I think we're going to get some Snoke stuff. We're going to get, you know, the story of Luke's Jedi Temple being destroyed again, the fall of Kylo Ren, all this other stuff. We're going to get all these other stories. And I'm very, very excited about it. I'm extremely excited. So if you can hold off just until next year, and I could see the announcements coming in as early as February next year. Once the dust settles on episode 9, once everybody has seen it, I think that's when you're going to really start to see some more stuff. The second part of your question, what do you think Star Wars has in store for us in the future, has a lot to do with everything I just said. I think because of the gap we have between episodes 9 and then whatever the Benioff and Weiss trilogy is going to be, let's just assume that it's going to be Old Republic, okay, for the sake of this conversation. Episode 9 comes out, we're going to have, 2 years there? 2-3 years there before the next film comes out. 3 years before the next film comes out to where we can really fill in and flesh out this entire, I don't know if you guys know this or not, I got all my books up here on the shelf, on like this V shelf. They're going to flesh out this entire timeline. Everything's going to be filled in. Everything between 6 and 7, 5 and 6, everything is going to be fleshed in. And I think they're going to take those 3 years and they're really going to hit that hard and fill out everything between the beginning of the timeline, which is actually it's Dooku Jedi Fallen. The audiobook is actually the beginning. I think they're going to fill in everything from there all the way up to the end of The Rise of Skywalker. That's going to be its own timeline period. That's everything that happened in this 60-year period, 70-year period. This is it. And then when the Benioff and Weiss trilogy starts, and like I said, let's say it's Old Republic, I think that's when they're going to start saying, okay, here's a new set of characters, a new face of Star Wars. The Skywalkers are gone. It's not about the Skywalkers anymore. That's all said, done in the past. That's a complete chapter in the timeline, book closed. That's it. This is the new Star Wars. It's Old Republic. These are your new characters. Let's build a new universe around these characters. Let's write books about them. Let's do comics about them. Let's do some video games that take place in the Old Republic with these characters. They're going to start their entire own timeline from scratch, unlike what they've been able to do with the classic stuff, because the other movies were already there. They had to build off of that. Now they can sit down and world build like a sumbitch. So once we get through episode 9 and we get up toward the Benioff and Weiss trilogy, you're going to see a shift in Star Wars, and it's not going to be your daddy's Star Wars anymore. This is going to be a new, I don't want to say generation because that's so cliche. It's going to be a new breed of Star Wars. It's going to be an entirely new, almost an entirely new universe. It's going to be the same universe, don't worry. But it's going to feel like an entirely different universe with the politics that are going on and the wars and the Sith. I mean, it might be getting Revan. Like all this other stuff's going to be happening. I think that's what Star Wars has in future for us. I think that's what it has in store for us in the future. I really do. I think 2 years from now, we're going to be having an entirely different conversation when it comes to Star Wars. 3 years from now, we're going to have an entirely different conversation about Star Wars. Everything's going to be different. We're going to be having new characters that we love. We're going to have new characters that we hate. We're going to have directors that we love. We're going to have directors that we hate. We're going to have stories that we love, books that suck like Heir to the Jedi. I mean, all these other, it's going to be ground up. Here we go. Start back at day one. Let's do this again. That's what it's going to be. So I hope that answers your question. What do you guys think? What do you think the future of Star Wars is going to look like? And try to keep it civil. I know I keep saying that during this podcast, but I know people like to argue a lot. So try to keep it civil. I know some of you hate Disney. Some of you love Disney. If you hate Disney Star Wars, I don't even know why you're listening to this podcast in the first place. But that's none of my business. But just try to keep it civil. So thanks for the question, Eric. I do appreciate it.